4L80's coming. It's in that truck.
I live in Charlotte.
Okay. That's perfect. Transmission Depot. They're out of Florida. A little plug for them. Transdepot.net. With the cross member done, I'm getting ready to move on to the next step, which is... Alright, I'm using this cooler clean to flush out all the bad stuff. Oh, but I gotta use two hands. Alright, with those transmission lines completely flushed out, I feel good about that. I'm ready to actually start some real work. I'm going to do the flex plate. So basically this flex plate here is a Hughes HP4004X. It is the same exact flex plate as my original. My original is a little bit tore up, so I decided to splurge and get a new one. It is the dished style flex plate, so it does not require a spacer. And I'm able to use this dished flex plate that's exactly the same as my old one because I got my torque converter from Circle D, and Circle D with their billet front end actually made it with the same bolt pattern as my old 4L60 torque converter, even though it is a 4L80 torque converter. So not a whole lot change there. Hey, check it out. It says engine side. All right, so we were able to complete the third pass and the flex plate is on now. And the only way I was able to do 74 pounds of torque was with my assistant here, who did a great job of basically, you can't see it, but there's a breaker bar up there that's hooked up to the harmonic balancer bolt, and he just held the breaker bar in place so that I was able to torque on this side. And now we're on at 74 foot-pounds, and now I can go on to the next step. Thank you, Robbie. Here's a step that I hope will help a lot of people. This is the transfer case adapter for my 4L60. You can see how big it is, and as you can tell, it does not go on here at all. It just does not work. So what you're gonna need is you're gonna need one of these. This is the 4L80 to the transfer case. And I'll put my transfer case number in the video because I just don't know what it is off the top of my head. But here's a couple things that slowed me down. Number one, there's a seal that goes in here. I bought the adapter, but I didn't know about the seal. So there's a seal right there. I'll put the number for the seal on the screen and the part number for this on the screen. All this I'll make available via Amazon in the description below. So here's another thing that tripped me up. I couldn't just transfer the bolts from the old one to the new one because they're too big to get in there. So I actually had to go, I ended up finding them at Lowe's. These are M10 1.5s by 25s. So I've cleaned this surface really, really well. And let's go ahead and mate these guys up. All right, with all of those guys on and ready to go, on to the next step. My 4L80 as purchased came with the 4L80 torque converter. This is the 6-bolt pattern. This is the 6-bolt pattern. This is a 2200 stall speed, which I'm not going to be using. So if anybody wants to buy it from me, just let me know. There we go. I'm swapping it out for this Circle D 3000 to 3200 with billet and then the 3-bolt pattern so that it can work with my existing flex plate. All right, I put a little over a quart of transmission fluid into the torque converter and let it settle down a little bit. Now there's nothing left to do. Put her on. is. There's the third click. All right, so what I'm doing to make sure this thing is properly seated is I'm just going to put a straight edge across the bell housing and line it up to where one of the little bolt pads are and see what the distance is. And it should be over an inch. And I'm at 1.01, so I feel comfortable with the fact that this thing is seated properly, and I can move on. Okay, it's time to vroom vroom. Think maybe we need to bring the truck down some. One of my main objectives with making this video is to share experiences where production just completely stopped for whatever reason or another. Even though I did so much research, there's still little things that have become showstoppers for me where I had to basically stop and go to the store and get something, and this was one of them. This is a 4L80 that I bought. It's not a 4L80 out of a junkyard. One thing that I completely overlooked was the fact that it didn't have a vehicle speed sensor on it. So essentially, this I need, and it's going to go right in there. And the part number is, well, at least this one's a Duralast SU1138. I was able to get it at AutoZone. It was like $30, I think. But yeah, completely overlooked it. Another thing is that from my 4L60 to the 4L80, the little bolts that held on the neutral safety switch on the 4L60 don't fit in the 4L80. So I'm still looking to source bolts with the right thread count that will work there. So that's just kind of another showstopper that I ran into. So from my understanding, we're going to put a speed sensor right here, and then this is going to be the one that gets wired to the PCM. And then this guy, because this is a four-wheel drive, this guy is going to stay exactly the way he is because I have another speed sensor in my transfer case. Now, my understanding is that if you have a two-wheel drive, you do use this one, but don't quote me on that. Maybe somebody will comment in the comments. But anyhow, this guy's complete with the O-ring. I'm going to go ahead and install him, and then I'm just basically stalling at that point because it's time to put this sucker up in there. And speaking of showstoppers, one more thought for you is that even though that this did come with this nifty bracket, it did not come with a bolt to get her locked down. So I'm going to have to hunt for something similar to that right there. So just sharing the things that are slowing me down so they don't slow you down. Okay, so for you, only seconds passed, but for me, it's been more like, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes. And I went to the store and I was able to find a bolt for this one and for that one and for that one. And so that I am prepared for the next time this happens, I got all of these and all of those and all those because I am sick and tired of getting one little step and then having to run to the store. You might want to go on Amazon and get some of these kits ahead of time. This one is metric right here. Those are metric fasteners. These are hex screws, an SAE, and then these are, what do they call these? These are SAEs, SAE, and metric. All right. So hopefully I won't have to run to the store again. So that's that. Next thing I did was the vent tube on, and I think we're ready to rock here. All right, this is where we're at. This is ground level, looking up. The transmission is on the transmission jack. Couple things to take note of. I put white lithium grease on the pilot and in the pilot hole. And if we look straight up, I have an exhaust stud sticking out each side to try to mate the hole and guide it in when I guide the transmission in. All right, so the secret to doing this successfully were those exhaust manifold studs. Basically just get the transmission lined up with the studs, slide it right on, and then start some of the other bolts. That one was actually one of the hardest ones right there, or maybe it was the next one up. Had to remove the headers on this side just to get to it. But it's on. I've got it supported by this big piece of wood right here, and this is here just in case. So I got that piece of wood there until I get the holes cut for the transmission crossmember. You remove your front wheel and remove that big fender well thing. I have my headers taken off. Look at the easy access that you get to that bolt right there, to that bolt right there, even the top one up there. Pretty easy access to all of them. Another thing I did is I took the heat shields out on both sides. There's a heat shield right here, which makes getting to this stuff a little difficult. There's one on the other side, but there she is. All right, so I test fitted and drilled the holes for the transmission cross member, and it is in. Everything is in and looks good, but I'm going to be pulling it back out to lower the transmission some because I forgot to make some of those connections, and I got to get all those wires out of the top of that thing. So I'll make the connections next and then put the jack back in place because I got to get the transfer case on. Yoo-hoo, yeehaw. The transmission cross member is out, and I have to embark on my least favorite part of the whole project, which is getting this guy in. So, transfer case is next. Yeehaw. Okay, so I stole my transmission jack back, loaded it up with the transfer case, and that transmission is now being supported by a regular jack. Cross member's out, and we'll see if we can't get this thing in without dying. All right, so the transfer case is in, and it's mated with the transmission, and it was the hardest step of this whole thing. And all I can say is that we had 3 people. We had one person watching the tail shaft back there. I was underneath it, and then we had a third person who was just acting as a spotter, and we just kept on wiggling the tail shaft, wiggling it back and forth, wiggling it up and down, and after a lot of wiggling, there was no secret to it, or at least there's a secret to it, I don't know it, but basically we got it on. And I've got it supported on a piece of wood here. I'm not putting the transmission cross member back in there because I think it will hold it higher than this. And essentially what I want to do is I want it to be as low as possible so that when I go to do the electrical, I can do the electrical as easy as possible, because I know that there's a speed sensor way up on top there. I don't know whether I can reach it or not, but that is where we're at. All right, so now that I got the transfer case in, I need to start buttoning up some of these electrical connections. Here's my neutral safety switch. There's my transfer case encoder motor. So I'm going to start with this one and start putting this stuff on and making the connections. All right, a couple things I'm going to do before I put the neutral safety switch on is I'm going to tap my oil temperature sensor, and I'm going to hook up the front speed sensor that came with my kit, which is somewhere. Here it is. Which is here. Trans temp sensor is in, and that's the front vehicle speed sensor is in. And I got to figure out a way to protect these lines because they're both going up into the engine bay. So I'll be looking into that. Well, it ain't pretty, but it should do for at least the first foot until I figure out where to go from here. But at least I can put my neutral safety switch back on and be done with this part. All right, so I got my O2 sensor. I got these 2 guys right here. And then there's a bunch on the transmission, or excuse me, there's a bunch on the transfer case. If you want a nauseating step-by-step, I've got another video on hooking all this stuff up. I'll link to it in the description of this video. So, but now I've got to get the transmission shift cable holder thing off of my 4L60 and put on the 4L80. Well, I hit another showstopper, and that is this bracket right here. This is off the 4L60. This is the bracket that holds the, I guess, the shift cable. And see the distance between that opening and that opening? Well, this is the 4L80. There's one, there's the other. And if I line this guy up over on this side, which obviously it has to go on the top, not the bottom. I'm just doing this from a standpoint of distance. Look at that. Not even close. So, back to the internet to find the part I need. All right, let's talk transmission oil cooler lines. I'm going to go ahead and run this line right here with some 6AN fittings. And let's see here. These are the ones that were in the transmission. They have the E-clips for the hard lines. I'm going to be running these. So I'm going to replace them with these fittings. So I'm going to replace them with these fittings right here. And because I'm going to be running a turbo, I'm going to wrap these lines in this DEI fire sleeve tape kit. All right, so this is just a test fit to see how those lines look and fit. So I'm going to measure the distance to the other end and start making some AN fittings. Well, there's the old transmission lines. Now it's time for the new transmission lines. All right, so here's a quick shot of me making the AN fittings for the transmission lines. And if you do decide to go this way, you can buy this at Summit. Probably get it online as well. It allows you to put the fitting in there so that you don't mar the fitting. And then there's a wrench that's made specially for these AN fittings as well. So I'm just going to crank this guy down, and I think you're supposed to get it to where this is the space between these two is 0.3. So I'm going to crank it down until it gets there. I do have a full video on making AN fittings. If you're interested in that, I'll leave the link in the description below. And then this is what I was talking about with the feeler gauge. You just put a feeler gauge in there, and if you can get the 0.3 in there, you need to crank it down a little bit more. And there's the finished product. All right, so this is how the transmission cooler lines turned out. And then as you get to right here, I've got the fire stuff on them. All right, it is now time to affix the flex plate to the torque converter with the bolts. And last time I did this, I got blessed out by somebody because he said that I didn't show it. But this is how it's done. You put your Loctite on, which I haven't done yet because I can't do all of it at once. But here's how you do this. You get somebody to hold the freaking crank bolt for you and rotate the flex plate for you. Nah. Okay. So he's just going to hold it while I do my torquing. And that's all there is to it. It's not that hard. Just get a buddy. Blue Loctite.
Can we hold that?
Huh?
Can we hold the camera for you?
Nah. You got it. I got it. I'm going to do it all right here. Blue Loctite. Is get it snugged up. So it's snugged up, right? In there with its blue Loctite, all happy. And now I'm going to say, here's the magic, boys and girls. Hey, assistant, will you turn the crankshaft for me, please?
Why, yes, I will.
But I don't put blue Loctite on it. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to do the same thing with the third one. And then I'm going to snug them down. Very simple. All right. This is really all there is to it. Wrench, 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 wrench. To the proper torquage. All right, so with the lines in, I went ahead and put on the starter. And I bought this extra plate just because I didn't like not having it. So I've got to get some bolts for that. And I got to get the starter all wired up. And then I think I'll be ready to put a header on this side. As far as the other side is concerned, it's been days waiting for bracket and waiting for bolts just for this one stupid thing. Alrighty, finally got the bracket in. And with the bracket in, when I put this guy in, and you can just trust me on this, it was way longer than that. It was like another inch longer. So what you do is right in there, it's threaded and hard to do with the camera in the hand, but you can turn it and it threads up in there and it changes the length. Changes the length of the shifter cable so that you can shorten it and lengthen it to make it work. So that's that. The bracket is in and I'm getting ready to put the shifter cable on. All right, so with the shifter in and the little bracket on, I get to turn my attention to something that's been scaring me since the beginning, and that is the drive shafts. Will they fit? So I'm very nervous, but I'm going to give it a go. We'll all be darned. It went in there without any problem whatsoever. Look at her. She looked good too. Look at that. Very nice. I was doing work for no reason. All right. Now, time for the back one. Word again. And hell I be. She went in there just right. Just right. Fit nice. All right, on to the next section that makes me nervous, which is getting the headers in. Let's see if I can make this happen. The headers are in. Passenger side header. Driver side header is in. All right, almost there. Time to put the transmission dipstick in. Putting in this transmission dipstick was easy peasy. It just slipped right on in there with a thin layer transmission fluid. And now I gotta figure out how to affix it to the firewall. So that's next on my list. All right, we're getting really close. I got, with the V-bands, it really makes putting the exhaust back together really easy. So the exhaust is back together again. I've got the transmission cross members in there, locked down. Everything else is in. I got an O2 sensor hanging, which means I got another one on the other side that I got to take care of. But I think I'm pretty much getting right down to where we need to do the segment swap. So we're getting down to the final stretch here. I'm going to pull this ECM out, and I've got the 2 wires from the front speed sensor that I need to tie into it. All right, so from the front, from the transmission, I got it going up high, very high over the headers so that it doesn't touch the headers. And it's just kind of coming along. Another one, and I've got it. It's right here, and this is my final destination. And I got a lot of extra. So I'm gonna go ahead and take care of these pins. All right, so I've successfully tapped into the ECM or PCM, whatever you want to call it, with the front speed sensor. And we're getting real close. I'm gonna let this hang precariously here for now, just to make sure that everything is working correctly. And if it is, then I'll go ahead and put it back in its spot. So all that's left at this point is filling it with fluids, throwing a battery in it, and doing a segment swap. And I'm going to make a new video to do that. So please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.